The Weasle is wrong about Donald Cerrone.
Wait, what did he say? I gotta hear this.
Let's run that clip.
It's like GSP and Demetrius Johnson and Jose Aldo, like the champions who have reigned for a long time, have to be in the Hall of Fame. Pioneers should be in the Hall of Fame, like BJ Penn, Mark Coleman, Royce Gracie, Chuck Liddell's the first star of the UFC, Ronda Rousey, various fighters like that. And then there's fighters like Jim Miller, most fights, most wins in UFC history. You have to put him in the Hall of Fame. He has the most extraordinary longevity in UFC history. The guy's been winning longer than everybody else. That in itself is a very difficult thing to do.
Let's speed this up a bit.
I remember when Daniel Cormier was saying that Jim Miller should not be in it, but it's like, dude, if you fought and won for that long in the UFC without retiring, without getting cut, or going on some insane loss streak, where that's happened to legends of the sport, Jim Miller's longevity, perseverance, and endurance through his career is absolutely extraordinary. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Then Charles Oliveira, not only because one of the biggest stars in his prime, one of the greatest lightweights, and had a fantastic career, but just off the fact that he has the most finishes in UFC history, should put him in the Hall of Fame. He's gonna be in it regardless, right? Now, Donald Cerrone's in the Hall of Fame. With him, I'm starting to think doesn't make as much sense. I guess it's because of the bonuses, but that's very arbitrary. The UFC gives bonuses. It's not an objective, concrete statistic. Like Jim Miller fought more than everybody else. We know that for a fact. That is without anyone's opinion or subjectivity. That is an objective fact. Donald Cerrone getting bonuses is just off of what the UFC felt like, right? Is that the main reason he's in the Hall of Fame? So I think Donald Cerrone's the one I would disagree with the most being in the Hall of Fame. Like you have to do something that's extraordinary compared to the other fighters. You have to win the most, you have to finish the most, you have to have the most knockouts.
You mentioned a few UFC records, and I only have one question. Who held both records before they were broken? Because if it was the same person you said didn't belong as much as the others, then you'd look like a real dumbass. What's up, fight freaks? It's the Combat Remix and 90% of all MMA's bad takes. But this one, I'm 100% right about Donald Cerrone. He absolutely deserves to be in the UFC Hall of Fame, and anyone who says otherwise is, well, I'll be nice and just say probably ignorant of certain facts. And sure, I may have came in a little strong in the beginning, but truth be told, I'm a fan of the MMA Weasle. And for you skeptics, you can find me saying just that in past videos. And spoiler alert, but he's even ranked in my top 10 favorite MMA YouTube channels. And sure, that video is several years old and in need of an updated list, but you get the point. And in the Weasle's defense, his comments didn't stem from a video topic he planned, but rather, he was actually taking questions from his viewers, and this topic came up. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't research his questions ahead of time, therefore he's answering these off the top of his head. Considering how many times I don't recall certain facts on the spot, I want to be as charitable as possible.
And then Olsen MMA. Now, coming off Dustin Poirier's retirement fight, I've seen some people say he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, which is absolutely ridiculous. My question is, what's your criteria whether for a fighter should be inducted inside the Hall of Fame? I think they have to do something extraordinary. I think Dustin should be in the Hall of Fame for the level of competition that he fought. He's one of the greatest lightweights of all time. He's the best fighter to never win the Undisputed Belt. He's had some big fights with Conor McGregor and Khabib. I think Dustin's like an overall good candidate for Hall of Fame, where he didn't do something specifically extraordinary, but everything he did was impressive, right?
Well, sure, I can agree to that, but it's juxtaposing that with your comments about Cerrone that seem a little inconsistent. Let's speed back up to that part.
I guess it's because of the bonuses, but that's very arbitrary. The UFC gives bonuses. It's not an objective, concrete statistic. Like Jim Miller fought more than everybody else. We know that for a fact. That is without anyone's opinion or subjectivity. That is an objective fact. Donald Cerrone getting bonuses is just off of what the UFC felt like, right? Is that the main reason he's in the Hall of Fame? So I think Donald Cerrone's the one I would disagree with the most being in the Hall of Fame. Like you have to do something that's extraordinary compared to the other fighters. You have to win the most, you have to finish the most, you have to have the most knockouts.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No! Cerrone is not in the UFC Hall of Fame because of his bonus awards. Or rather, that's a very small part of it. Sure, Cowboy used to hold the record for the most bonus awards, but you also brought up the record for the most wins and the most finishes in the UFC. And I want to be fair because it's easy to not recall certain facts at any given moment, but at one time Cerrone held all three of those records. Furthermore, Cowboy has been retired for over 3 years now and is still tied for the third most wins and finishes, and is tied for the 8th most knockouts. Not to mention he is still the sole record holder for the most knockdowns and head kick knockouts in the UFC. Is that specific and extraordinary enough for you? But we can keep going. If we switch the record from specifically in the UFC to under the Zuffa banner, then Cerrone would still be the record holder for most wins and finishes. Well, actually in the case of the most finishes, he'd be the dual record holder with Charles Oliveira. And while this is just the icing on the cake, we have to mention that Cerrone's fighting style is extremely fan-friendly, which is why he is largely accepted as one of the most, if not the #1 fan-cherished fighter. Not only because of his fighting style, but also his willingness to fight anyone, even on short notice. Which is a great segue to another previous record of Cerrone's, that being the most fights in a calendar year with 5, until Neil Magny tied it, but he did it within fewer days. So there was a time when Cowboy held at least 5 UFC records simultaneously. Furthermore, he was on several other top 10 lists for other UFC records. In fact, in February of 2021, Cerrone was tied for the 10th most submissions in UFC history, ranked 8th for the highest takedown defense, and tied for the 6th most knockouts in the UFC. This is why Cerrone is in the UFC Hall of Fame and deserves to be in it more than any other previously mentioned fighter. But like I said, no disrespect to the MMA Weasel. He's always been one of my favorite MMA channels and a way more successful channel than I'll ever be. I just happen to be familiar with these UFC records that were held by Cowboy and had to respond. But before we end this video, I want to leave you with one last bonus fact from a video I put out over 4 years ago. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only one who's provided this fact. So here's a quick flashback.
You mentioned that Cerrone holds the record for the most bonus awards. But fun fact, had the UFC delayed replacing submission and knockout of the night with performance of the night for only 2 months, well then Cerrone would have become the first fighter to win 3 bonus awards in all 3 categories. And while you may think this is pure speculation, I assure you it's not. Just 2 months after the bonus change, Cerrone would be the only fighter to win via submission when he defeated Edson Barboza. So there was no way he wasn't going to get the submission of the night. This has been 10 random MMA facts. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Feel free to let me know any other top 10 MMA lists you'd like me to do, as well as super fight bouts or MMA lookalikes. I always appreciate my fight freaks, and as for the rest of you, like and subscribe before I send a Jehovah's Witness to your house. Remix is signing out, always bringing your MMA fix.
Chris Lights Out Lytle!
And then the people that came and traveled all the way to watch me fight in person, I wanted to make sure that I was with them. So that kind of, I haven't really got to reach out and tell the world really how I'm thinking, how I'm processing this.
Ma'am, this is the Wendy's.